Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Ferguson, and we're going to welcome you to NewThing Online. And if you kind of look over my shoulder, all these handsome people here. Wave, guys, ladies. There you go. This is just a gathering here in Chicago of people that are leading networks and leading movements for NewThing. And so we're coming to you live. And if you've been around NewThing at all, our mission is to catalyze movements of reproducing churches. And you can't be around anybody from NewThing for very long and you don't hear about reproducing. You're going to hear about movement making, almost ad nauseum. But part of the reason, and here's why I want to stress this, is because movement is how the mission gets accomplished. And when the mission gets accomplished, it impacts people. It's always about people. I was reminded of that just the last week or so. I got a text message from somebody in our church, a lady in our church, saying, "Hey, I really need to talk to you. I got something I need to talk to you about." And to be honest, my first reaction was kind of like, "Oh crap, what did I do?" And so we got together, and I was expecting her to unload something I needed to work on, or something we needed to change, or something she was upset about. But she sat across from me as we kind of sipped on a Starbucks, and she said, "Hey, I just wanted to get together to say thanks." And she said, "I wanted to just thank you because last week I got to be a part of the junior high camp that we run every summer, and I got to lead this group of girls and make a difference in their lives, and not only make a difference in their lives, but it made a difference in my life." And she said, "I just want to thank you for letting me be a part of that." And she said, not only that too, but it was fun for me being involved in those girls' lives because, you know, I have 3 boys. And she began to talk about each of her young men in her family and how each of them are now a Christ follower. One's getting ready to be a medical doctor. He actually started a not-for-profit when he was a high school kid that's called Food Fight that has impacted millions of people around the world because they've actually packaged food that have gone to under-resourced places around the country. She talked about her middle child who's now leading the group for junior high boys who's in high school. She talked about her youngest son who wants to go into the youth ministry, and she looked me in the eye and said, "Hey, thank you so much." And I remember the first weekend they showed up at Community, and they were both far from God, and I got to see them find their way back to God. And so part of the reason we at NewThing are so passionate, talk so much about movement making and reproducing is because that's how the mission gets accomplished, and that's what impacts real people, helps real people find their way back to God. So that's what it's all about. In a moment, you're going to get a chance to hear from someone who is one of the real thought leaders when it comes to movement, a guy named Steve Addison. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to Jason Webb. Jason, you want to join me here? Let's everybody in the background give Jason a little love. There you go. Jason is a network leader and been a part of NewThing for a few years now. And I just asked him to come in and kind of just share with you online. For you, as a church pastor and as a leader, how has NewThing helped you?
Well, you know, it really helped us think beyond ourselves. You know, we had a vision that I thought was a big vision for our church until I started meeting with like-minded pastors in the area, started connecting with NewThing, and realized that our vision was nothing. I mean, it was small potatoes. And so when we got together and started joining NewThing, we realized that our small vision for the area where we were located was not what God intended. God wanted us to reach an entire city, and now we're dreaming about God helping us reach an entire state with reproducing churches, and it's been a blast. It's expanded the vision of our congregations. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Well, and I asked Jason to talk because he's done a great job in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah.
And really, it went from the one church that he planted, and now there actually is a whole network there that's even considering reproducing networks. So talk about how you end up being a network leader and kind of what's happened there.
Yeah, that wasn't by intention. It just kind of happened. But, we started seeing churches really fall in love with the vision. And what happened, I think the key to it all was churches decided to put their egos down. Yeah. And we realized that we are not multiple churches. We are one church in the Milwaukee area. And so we started dreaming together. We're actually, when I think of church in the area, I don't think of the church I'm a part of. I actually think of the 7 churches that are part of our networks and what can we do to help them. And so that's where it started. And now it's attracting other actually fairly significant churches in the area. They're saying, hey, what's going on here? We want to be a part of that. Awesome. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's pretty, and what Jason's describing here too is just one example of what we're seeing happen across the country within NewThing, but also within other groups too, where you're seeing people that are crossing theological divides and saying, no, the mission is primary. The mission is primary. How do we work together to accomplish the mission?
Absolutely.
So thanks.
Right.
Thanks very much.
Yep.
You're in for a real treat next. You're going to get a chance to hear from a guy named Steve Addison. Steve's a guy who wrote a book called Movement, How Movements Change the World. He also wrote a book called What Jesus Did. He was recently in Australia, just recently moved to London. He oversees an organization called Move that is about disciple making and planting brand new churches. There are few people literally on the planet who, at least in the Christian world, who's done as much thinking probably about the topic of movement as has Steve Addison. And so it's with great pleasure that we're going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to address you right now.
Hi, it's good to be with you. I'm Steve Addison, and miracle of modern technology, I'm coming to you from a cupboard in East London. My wife Michelle and I have God's called us after a few decades in Australia to pick up and move here to London, where we're pioneering our ministry while others continue it in Australia. We don't have internet yet in our office at home, so I found a church cupboard, and it's quite comfy and soundproof. So it's good to be talking to you today. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the book I wrote on movements. It somehow about 25 years ago that question of movements just gripped me as I sort of looked across different times around the world and in the scriptures. I just sort of began to see not just individual ministries or church plants or existing churches growing and all those sorts of things. I started realizing this is all about movements. In fact, even history itself, you think of all the great sort of social changes, political changes in your own history, the history of your own country, wherever you've come from, and movements will, for good or for evil, have played a great part. Same with fashion or music. And so we began to see this is a dynamic that God's built into us as human beings, that when people get together and commit to a common cause, change happens. And I began to see Jesus as the founder of what became really the world's first global missionary movement. And he intended that right from the start. And so that sort of led me into all sorts of, delving into the scriptures, looking at history, looking at movements around the world. And I just got obsessed. That's how you can become, this is a secret for you becoming famous. Just find something nobody else is interested in and get to know it really well. And that's what I did for some time. And then out of all that sort of ferment, I just sat down one day and sort of thought, well, out of all of these case studies, out of what we see in the Gospels and Acts and ministry of Paul, what are some just bedrock principles of what it looks like when we see, especially what I call disciple-making movements, people that are helping others to connect with Jesus, finding salvation in him, but not just putting up their hand in the back of a church hall or a meeting somewhere, but learning to follow and obey Jesus as a disciple. What are the characteristics of those movements that God's used to shape our world and to change lives, change the world? And so we coalesced around five key areas that we've sort of written about in the book. And one of them, in fact, none of them are a big surprise when you look at them. They all, I can't even say they're necessarily original. I'm just reflecting back what I'm seeing, what the patterns that I'm seeing. And first one is white hot faith. Doesn't start with a big resource center with people with a lot of credentials and institutional backing. Typically, it starts with people who are naive enough to know it can't be done. And one of the examples in history, I think, of this in the whole political world was the downfall of communism. It's itself a movement that had stagnated and died. They woke up one day and realized we don't have any legitimacy anymore. And it was a movement that helped that whole process. It was in Poland. The Gdansk shipyards is a big dockers strike, and Lech Wałęsa climbed over the barbed wire fence and sort of brought the striking workers together, and a movement called Solidarity was born in Poland. And it played, along with the Polish Pope, played an important part in the breakup of the grip that communism had on Eastern Europe and Russia. And, what did Lech Wałęsa have? He just had a cause. He had, he had faith in that sense. But when we look at disciple-making movements around the world, the greatest movement, far greater than communism or any other movement in human history, is the move of God amongst, the two-thirds world or the global South over the last 100 years, often paralleled with the move through Pentecostalism. Typically, those movements that are sweeping Asia and Africa and South America have a very vibrant spirituality, but very committed to the gospel and to Christ. Those movements went from 0 to about 500 million people within a century, and really did change globally the map. And no other movement in history has had that sort of impact. What did they have? They had a white hot faith. They had a determination. And, at the heart of this is beyond just any sociological categories, it's got to be a work of God. You think of the movement that came out of, the Apostle Paul or Saul's encounter with Jesus on the Damascus Road. It's not, first of all, based on his theological studies or his iron will. He's a broken man when Jesus calls him to go change the world. He has a lot of abilities, but they're dying with him on that Damascus Road. And the only resource he has is his faith. It's the Word and the Spirit. And so God used him to take the gospel into the Gentile world. So white hot faith is key. How do you get white hot faith? I talk about crisis and process. So the crisis is the Damascus Road experience. It can be really good. It can feel really bad. The key sort of common thread is an unraveling, a loss of confidence in ourselves, but a big confidence in God, a surrender to him. Often surrender precedes, his leading forward of a movement. And the movement is almost a byproduct of surrendering to God and his purposes. So first of all, it's his mission, it's not ours. So white hot faith is key. Now, you probably see there's a lot of overlap between each of these five, because the next one's commitment to a cause. And obviously, when there's that spiritual ferment, there's commitment to a cause. So it's coming not just of, we hate the idea of commitment and discipline and all of those sorts of things, but it's something's gripped us. And movements have an incredible, when they ossify, second, third generation, then it's very legalistic. But in the early days, people make high demands on themselves because they've sold out for something. It's like the young guy that used to drive from city to city every single weekend, get in the car Friday night, drives 8 hours through the night, stays the weekend. Sunday night, he drives home. That's 16 hours driving, over a weekend. He's very committed. No, he's in love. His fiancée is over there. But there's something stirs in us, but it leads to high levels of commitment and expectations. So, Jesus had his ministry to the crowds, and they're in that sort of place of indecision. He's serving them, he's blessing them, he's healing them, he's teaching them. He doesn't confuse the crowds with disciples. He makes pretty high demands on his disciples, not just the 12, but the wider band of men and women who followed him. So there's grace, but grace leads to demand. And if you want a great lesson in that, because I think Westerners who aren't so sure of gospel truth anymore and gospel standards of behavior, we sort of think, no, that's legalistic. That's not grace. But just go back, read the Gospels, and have a look at how Jesus approached the whole issue of grace and truth. He was a high demand leader, and movements have that characteristic. So they're broadly, just as Jesus did, they're broadly connected into a society. But at the heart of them, there is a band of committed people. Now, some people are very committed, but they're not connected. Other people are very connected, but there isn't a core of belief and truth at the middle of it. People who change the world, like Jesus, are both connected and grace-filled, and at the same time, they have high levels of commitment and expectations of people who join the movement. Another characteristic is that of contagious relationships. So it doesn't matter whether it's fashion or ideas or faith or the common cold. It spreads dynamically and exponentially through relational networks. And so it's not just a matter of you building a friendship. Jesus is saying, as he goes around every town and village in Galilee, I'm looking for responsive people. I'm looking for a woman at the well because she will connect me and the message with a whole village. I'm looking for a Zacchaeus because if the kingdom comes to Zacchaeus's house, his whole family, extended family, his village will see that. Or Peter, I'm looking for, or at least God is dragging him to, a guy called Cornelius. And so this is true not just 2,000 years ago, but it will always be true because we're made in the image of God. We're made for community. The community is broken down in Western cultures, but people still live in relational worlds, even though they may be more fragmented. And so it's really critical that we move from just seeing individuals to saying, okay, that person's going on a journey now. Our first thought is, how can we get them into our group? Bring them to our church or our missional community or whatever we might bring them to. Let's get them into our group. Jesus' first thought is, how can I plant the gospel in that person's life and through them touch a whole village or a relational network? So it's each of these key principles, but you've got to tweak them to get them right. And so contagious relationships is not just about you connecting with your neighbors. It's about the most responsive people on the planet is someone who's just seen a dear friend or a relative's life change. So when you see a breakthrough with somebody, you've got to be asking, who else do they know? And how can we get the gospel into that world and not just extract them out of it? And then the fourth pattern that we just see repeatedly is the whole thing of rapid mobilization. So everybody gets to play the game. It's not, these movements don't abolish the clergy, they just ordain everybody for ministry. That's the bottom line. And so there are no artificial or non-biblical sort of standards before somebody can go do ministry. So everybody is out there. There isn't a clergy lady distinction. Doesn't mean there aren't leaders, but the expectation is, if someone comes to faith, they're the doorway into their world. We're born to serve. So, and right from the beginning, people are finding, what is it that God wants me to do, and they're being mobilized for ordinary ministry that transforms lives. And the last one that we talk about, and we're just tree-topping this, have a read of the book or find a good summary somewhere, and you can go into it more in depth. But the last one is adaptive methods. And the best example I could think of adaptive methods was being in the highlands of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, just the big island above Australia. And there I am. We're in a very remote part of the world. These people have sort of been out, sort of connected with the wider world for not at that time for about a decade. But there's about 50 guys on this dusty pitch up in the highlands of New Guinea, and they're playing soccer, or as the rest of the world says, football, the round ball game. And they're going at it, hammer and tong, all for about 2 hours. That was the real match. They were from different tribes. Instead of warring, they were playing soccer. And then they had a bit of a break and played the social game. Now, you can take sort of that round ball and put it at the feet of hundreds of millions of people around the world. And if they don't know how to play the game, they'll pick it up pretty quickly. And that's why soccer is the world's game. You just need, a bit of, a dusty pitch, or you might be paying £100 to watch the game, or, a couple of $100 to watch the game here in London. You could be in the highlands of New Guinea on a dusty pitch just with a round object, and you're away. It might take a lifetime to learn the game, but you can pick it up immediately. And I just ask, why can't church be like that? Why can't, everything that we do is so simple but profound and reproducible that anyone can pick it up and begin playing the game. So all of our methods are contagious, they're adaptable, they're expandable, they're transferable. I'll give you an example. We call it Discovery Bible Study. So it's our outreach tool, it's our discipleship tool, it's our leadership development tool. It's as complicated as reading or sharing, say, a story from the life of Jesus or one of the stories he told. Let's say we share the woman who wept at Jesus' feet. And then we just ask some real simple questions. What do you learn about God or Jesus in this story? What do you learn from the people in the story? Is there something in this story you need to do, or that it teaches you should obey? And what will you do? And could you share this story with somebody this week? And why don't we practice it so you'll be able to do that? And then how can we pray for you? Now, you just need a story. You don't even need a Bible, and you need those questions. We help people who are far from God discover God through those simple questions and the simple stories. And when someone hears that story of the woman who wept or the prodigal son, and God touches their life and they're wrestling, not just intellectually, but with obedience. So we're discipling people to conversion. Something's grabbing them. We say, well, is there anyone else in your world who would like to do this? Why don't you do this with them? So it's a simple but profound method of making disciples, teaching them to obey what Jesus commanded. And we use that in discipling people to conversion. We use it for new believers. We use it for developing leaders. Same simple questions, same approach. That's an adaptive method. It can go anywhere. It's being done in boardrooms, in corporations, and it's being done with illiterate workers in North India and Nepal, and because it's simple, profound. So they're the 5 characteristics that we look for. There's one missing that I won't be able to talk about too much now, but the other key area, and we're sort of redressing the the lack in the book with another book in about a year's time is pioneering leadership, apostolic leadership. So we see certainly those 5 things, and often there's that 6th element of people who are willing to take a risk and get out on the fringe. And what I'll do is I'll just sort of round it off by telling you that there came a point in my journey where I got converted by my own book. Not literally converted, but my life was changed. And this is how it went. The book had been out for about a year, and it was doing well. It's a good book, actually, So Michelle and I were talking about it, and I was reminding her, this is a good book. It's doing well. And she said, Steve, you have written a great book. And, it's nice when a wife sort of acknowledges with a bit of prompting that her husband has achieved something in life. And I should have been ready for the follow-up, which was, Steve, what I'm wondering, though, is when are you going to do something? Now, guys, there's only one thing worse than when your wife asks you a question like that. And you can identify with me. And that is when God is speaking to you through your wife. And so that was an awful moment in the life of this husband, because I'm thinking, yeah, I wouldn't change anything in this book. These are the principles. But then I realized, what's the point of having the engine if the car's not in gear? And I reflect on my own life. It's been a long time since I had made a disciple. Here I am, I'm leading a mission agency, I'm giving people good stuff because I'm learning from practitioners. I'm learning from the life ministry of Jesus. And now God is saying, but Steve, you don't make disciples with principles. And so I went to my book and got to principle number 3, contagious relationships. What should I do? Go prayer walking and look for that woman at the well, that responsive person. Now I'm busy because, I'm in Christian ministry. So we got an hour and a half on a Sunday afternoon and we went prayer walking, just seeing what God would do. And it's real easy prayer walking because you just have to fight the devil, and wrestle the strongholds down and all of that. Whereas you don't have to actually talk to a human being. That's the scary thing, And so Michelle wants to, go in this bookstore. And I said, Michelle, it's a Chinese bookstore. We don't read Chinese, Well, we ended up, she dragged me in there. We meet a young lady. We get to connect with her. She chases us around the bookstore for the next half hour wanting to talk. She's supposed to be working, but she wants to chase these 2 people who can't even buy a book in her own store. And one thing led to another. We got to know her relational world. The gospel touched her relational world. Michelle, with a bit of help from me, set up a Connect ministry in that community of English sort of conversation club. And we did Discovery Bible Study as part of the program, and then followed up people who wanted to know more. And, in the last, few years before we've just left Australia a couple of months ago, we led more people to Christ and into discipleship than we had in the whole rest of our lives. And so I just want to challenge you with this, read the book. It is a good book, okay? Mainly because I've relied on people who know what they're doing. But the principles aren't enough. Jesus has called us to make disciples, and sooner or later we've got to step out. We've got to obey. We've got to do something, and it's got to have at the heart, what did Jesus do? And you see him moving amongst people. He's praying for needs. He's sharing a story. He's making a challenge, ministering to the crowds, but he's looking for the disciples. And so just keep asking, what did Jesus do? And what does that need to look like for me? And let me tell you, it's a lot more fun than, anything else I've ever done in my life. So I'm going to pray for you that God would stir in each one of us and just bring us back. You renew movements by making like a fresh return to the heart and soul of the movement. They call it an innovative return to tradition, the good tradition of a movement. And if you want to see a movement, you've got to get back to what did Jesus do? What did he train the 12 to do? What did he continue to do through the church in Acts? And so that's the returning. You've got to get back there, but then you have to ask, okay, what does that look like today? And how do we obey that example today? Let's pray together. Lord, we just thank you that it's your mission. And you've called us to partner with you. It's not our mission. We cannot change the human heart. We cannot make disciples. And yet, Lord, you've commanded it, that you want to do this in us and through us. And Lord, we want to be learners in that. And we want to take those steps of obedience, Lord, to find someone in need, to be a blessing, to pray for a need, to share a story, to invite someone to discover who Jesus is, and to help them begin to follow him, and maybe even bring some other people with them. And Lord, bring us back to the simplicity of your ministry that changed the world. We ask in your name. Amen. Well, thanks for sharing this with me. It's been a real pleasure.
Wait, don't go just yet. I wanted to thank you for being with us today. It was great having the opportunity to do NewThing Online from our Movement and Network retreat right here in Chicago. Wasn't Steve Addison great? I mean, I love his passion for Jesus and his desire to see movement all over the world. We're still live in the room doing a Q&A with Steve right now. This is a perk for being with NewThing. We're able to offer our trainings to everyone. However, our time where we dive deeper into content is exclusive to those.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Good.
Now, NewThing Online is one
great.
way we
That
bring
was
you some of the
awesome.
most insightful
Awesome.
voices and
Nailed
practitioners
it.
in the church planting and missional
What we're
movement.
trying
It's
to do
our
is
hope that
figure
these
out how to
online
get you on
training
our screen
opportunities
so we
will
can ask you
accomplish
some
3
questions.
objectives.
So
Number
will you
one,
just bear
we
with
want
us a
to
moment?
better
Let's see if we
equip
can't fix
NewThing
And
network leaders and
whatever
pastors.
works best for
We are
you, I
encouraging our
can do
network
this by
leaders to use
text
this
if
content
feedback's a
from
problem,
this online
or
training to
audio's
jumpstart your
fine as
monthly
well.
network calls. We also hope that our NewThing pastors will use this content
with
to
us for a
train
moment,
their
sir.
church staffs. To help facilitate this, we have provided a training resource PDF that we have already sent to you. We also believe these broadcasts will create synergy throughout NewThing. We all know that vision leaks, right? And we believe that coming together online will remind us of why we do what we do and how together we are catalyzing a movement of reproducing churches. That is why every time we are together, we'll include a vision brief from Dave. And finally, we believe this kind of training gives prospective church planters another reason to jump in with NewThing. God has blessed NewThing with access to some of the most cutting-edge thought leaders and practitioners. We know that we can't all afford to go to them, so we plan to go to them and bring them to you with fresh, new content. One of our 4 R's is leadership residency, and we'd love to see each of our NewThing churches and locations have a leadership resident. There are some cool things happening around residency I wanted to bring your attention to. First, we're looking for people to do a NewThing leadership residency at our NewThing churches. Leadership residency is a 9 to 12-month training and equipping at a NewThing church to prepare you to help start a movement of reproducing churches. If you want to know more about leadership residency or want to even apply to be one, go to newthing.org/residency and take our free online assessment. And if you're interested in doing a residency in Chicago, I have a special opportunity for you. We are really excited about our NewThing leadership training right here at Community. This will be a state-of-the-art facility and program that will allow us to train and equip leadership residents in new ways. We're looking for residents to join our cohort starting in January. If you're ready to begin a leadership residency in Chicago with Dave and John Ferguson, now is the time to apply. Some residents will even receive a stipend. You'll want to check out newthing.org/residency at the end of this training. If you've been thinking about doing a residency, this is a unique opportunity for you. That's newthing.org/residency. And if you've missed any of our other NewThing online trainings, you can view them on our live stream page at any time. Well, thanks again for being with us today. Please keep coming back to NewThing Online because, well, we have some great people lined up in the coming months. We're going to hear from Vince Antonucci and Nikki Gumbel and others. We're very fortunate to have such experienced speakers on our 2014 NewThing Online faculty. Signing off from Chicago, we'll see you next time.